Welcome to Let's Talk Mental Health, where we bring awareness to the causes and solutions of mental health conditions. I'm your host, Nathan Nedley. We are in our fourth part out of a 5-part series dealing with the 10 depression hit categories. I'm here with Dr. Neil Nedley. Tell me about developmental hits. That's the first one we're going into today.
Developmental hits has to do with how you were raised. If you were abused sexually growing up, you have a developmental hit. If you've had traumatic experiences growing up that you might still be suffering from, that's a clue that you could have a developmental hit. If you were raised in a dysfunctional home where you didn't know when breakfast was going to be served, or was there set structured meal times, was there transportation provided for school, or was there enough healthy structure in the home environment? If there wasn't, that could be a developmental hit. Was there appropriate discipline, or was there, more physical abuse, or emotional, or abuse growing up in a home? And so these are all things we look at because they do have an impact in regards to adult mental health and also, of course, teenage mental health. And so this is a crucial aspect of causes of depression.
This is dealing with things that happened during childhood, right?
Correct.
So is there anything that someone can do to kind of overcome this, or?
Yes, there is. Now, developmental hits are, not as easily fixable as a nutrition hit,
right,
or a lifestyle hit, but there are important aspects of healing from developmental hits and breaking the cycle of abuse or those type of things and being able to reframe things. So this is why we have counselors in our program. This is where cognitive behavioral therapy comes in. This is where we help the participant to see whether it's appropriate guilt or inappropriate guilt. Because sometimes they feel inappropriate guilt over things that they had no control over, and that's not going to help them at all. And so this is the world of cognitive behavioral therapy, and going back and helping the individual to be able to think differently now and not have those events of the past color everything in regards to how they see the world now and how they can differentiate that.
The first 3 parts that we went into dealt more with physical things like exercise and diet and nutrition and those types of things. This is what you're talking about, cognitive behavioral therapy. This is the nitty-gritty thinking stuff, right?
Exactly.
So as far as thinking patterns go, are there clear signs that someone who's abused, they always have a certain thinking pattern, or is it much more complex that there can be a whole amalgamation of different thinking patterns that can cause problems?
Well, it depends on the type of abuse. And so there are several different types of abuse, and how we treat those is actually differently. For instance, there are some forms of sexual abuse where even though the sexual abuse was very inappropriate, it was very pleasurable for the child. And so that child had a tendency to hook up with sex addictions and inappropriate types of things, and that colored their thinking in regards to a lot of other areas. And then there were some where it was painful and it was traumatic, and that would color their worldview of sex in a far different way. And so those are things that we have to go back at and try to discover. And yes, there are, for different types of abuse, there are set patterns in regards to irrational thoughts that will tend to occur as a result of those different forms of abuse. And so we're going to recognize that pattern, be able to help the person recognize when they are prone to those irrational thoughts, and then how they can correct those thoughts.
Right. And this wouldn't just be with abuse, but any of the developmental hits.
Correct.
Right.
Yes.
The second one that we're going to be looking at is social/complicated grief. What is this, and what does it look like?
Well, we are social creatures. It's kind of interesting that in the creation story, we see every day that God said that it was good, But even before sin was introduced into the world, we have the words uttered from God, "It is not good." And what he said after that is, "It is not good for man to be alone." In other words, he designed us to be social and to have other people around us and to have that social affiliation. Many people with depression feel socially isolated. They might be around a lot of people, but they feel isolated. And I'll ask them when they come to the program, who is your number one emotional support? And it might be their dog, you know. And they'll think, and they might even be married, and they might have siblings, and they might have parents, but they're not really close to any of them. And this is occurring with alarming frequency today because of the devices that are taking people away from family attachments. And of course other factors that can play a role in that, dysfunctional families and those sorts of things. And it turns out our brains work far better when we are able to have very close friends. 3 to 5 close friends is all we need. And one of those might be a spouse, and one of those might be a brother or sister. But if we have 3 to 5 close friends that we can be transparent with and that are healthy attachments, and helping us to actually advance in life in positive ways that are healthy for both parties, that's a win-win. And that's something that we can help the participant recognize the value of and to be able to change their unhealthy social networks into things that are healthy.
What constitutes a hit in the social aspect? Is it like if you don't have 3 to 5 close friends, is that a hit? Or is it?
May not be enough of a hit. In our testing, we have multiple things, and you have to have over a third of those positive to show up as a social hit. But that would certainly be a contributing factor if you don't have that.
Okay. And then the second side of this is the complicated grief. Mm-hmm. I'm guessing this has to do with loss or, and I guess that could be loss in not only just someone that was close to you, but maybe something that
could be loss of a job.
Yeah, loss of a job, loss of a body part. It's terrible as that sounds.
Right. Yes, and so overcoming loss is an important factor. And if we're not going through the tasks of healthy grieving after a loss, we're going to get stuck and we're going to have this hit. And grieving is not something that people do naturally healthy.
I see.
And so they have to be taught that process of being able to turn disappointments into appointments. If we don't go through the healthy grieving, our disappointments are going to actually take us down. Where we can actually turn disappointments into appointments, even devastating ones, if we go through the tasks of healthy grieving, and we can actually grow from losses. And that's our goal, and that's something that the program that we have is very intentional about. Even our community-based program, we have a whole section on how to do this, on overcoming loss. We do in our residential program. Of course, we have counselors as well to help with this. All of us, if we live long enough, are going to have some significant, devastating losses. We don't know what they are right now necessarily, but it's good to know ahead of time how to be able to go through those losses in a healthy way.
Very interesting. And obviously there's a lot to learn here and a lot to implement as far as dealing with some of these social factors and thinking factors. Thank you for your time. Join us next time as we conclude this series and we go over the final 2 points, frontal lobe and addiction. I'm your host, Nathan Nedley. This is Let's Talk Mental Health. As always, stay healthy, live happy.